The sun blazed mercilessly over the dusty town of Copper Ridge as Marcus Sullivan rode his weathered horse down the main street. His clothes were torn and faded from weeks of traveling through the harsh desert. Water was running low in his canteen, and his stomach growled with hunger. The town looked like salvation after so many days of seeing nothing but sand and rocks. Marcus had been wandering the desert for 3 months now, ever since he lost everything in a card game. Gone wrong back in Silver Creek. The man who won his ranch turned out to be working with the sheriff, and Marcus barely escaped with his life when he tried to prove the game was rigged. Now he was just another drifter, moving from town to town, trying to survive. As he rode past the wooden buildings, he noticed something strange. A large crowd had gathered in the town square, all looking toward a wooden platform that had been hastily built. 2 nooses hung from a crossbeam, swaying slightly in the hot wind. Marcus felt his blood run cold when he saw 2 young Apache women standing on the platform, their hands tied behind their backs. The women couldn't have been older than 20. They stood tall and proud despite their situation, showing no fear even though death waited just steps away. Their dark eyes scanned the crowd with dignity that impressed Marcus. These were not common criminals. Something felt very wrong about this scene. Marcus dismounted and pushed through the crowd, trying to get closer. The townspeople were excited, talking loudly about justice being served. But their words didn't match what Marcus saw in front of him. These women looked like they had been beaten. Their clothes were torn and bruises marked their faces and arms. What did they do? Marcus asked an old man standing nearby. The man spat into the dirt. Murdered the banker's family, they did. Snuck into their house 3 nights ago and killed them all. Even the children. His voice was full of hate. Sheriff caught them trying to sell the stolen goods the next morning. Marcus studied the women again. Something about their faces told him this story wasn't true. He had seen many criminals in his travels, and these women didn't look like cold-blooded killers. They looked like victims themselves. The sheriff stepped onto the platform, a fat man with a star-shaped badge that gleamed in the sunlight. "People of Copper Ridge," he shouted, "justice will be done today. These savage women killed innocent folks, and they'll pay for their crimes." The crowd cheered, but Marcus noticed not everyone seemed happy about what was happening. Some people looked uncomfortable, whispering among themselves. An old Apache man stood at the edge of the crowd, tears running down his weathered cheeks. Marcus guessed this man might be related to the condemned women. As the sheriff prepared to read the charges, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He couldn't stand by and watch 2 innocent-looking women die without knowing the truth. Something about this whole situation stunk worse than a dead skunk in the desert sun. He pushed forward through the crowd until he reached the front. "Wait," he called out. "I demand to hear the evidence against these women." The sheriff looked annoyed. "Who are you, stranger?" "This is none of your business. I am a citizen, and I have the right to hear the charges and evidence before an execution," Marcus said loudly, making sure everyone could hear him. He wasn't sure if that was actually true, but it sounded official enough. The crowd murmured, some people nodding in agreement. The sheriff's face turned red with anger, but he couldn't ignore the request without looking suspicious. "Fine," the sheriff growled. "These women, Running Deer and Little Fox, broke into the home of banker William Morrison 3 nights ago. They killed him, his wife, and their 2 young children with knives. Then they stole money and jewelry. My deputy caught them the next morning trying to trade the stolen goods for horses." Marcus listened carefully. The story sounded neat and tidy, too neat. Where are the stolen goods? Where are the weapons they used? The sheriff hesitated for just a moment, but Marcus caught it. "The evidence is safe in my office." "I'd like to see it," Marcus said firmly. "After the execution," the sheriff snapped. "We're not delaying justice for some drifter who rode into town 5 minutes ago." The crowd was getting restless. Some people wanted to see the evidence too, while others just wanted to get on with the hanging. Marcus realized he was running out of time. The women would be dead in minutes if he didn't act. That's when he noticed something that made his heart race. One of the women, the one called Running Deer, had a small scar on her left hand that looked like a crescent moon. Marcus had seen that exact same scar before years ago when he helped a wounded Apache girl who had been attacked by raiders. She couldn't have been more than 12 then, but the scar was unmistakable. "Running deer?" he called out. The woman looked at him with surprise. "Do you remember a man who helped you when you were hurt by raiders? You were just a child, hiding in the rocks near Eagle Canyon." Her eyes widened with recognition. She nodded slightly, and Marcus knew he was right. This was the same brave little girl he had bandaged and given water to years ago. She had grown into a beautiful woman, but life had clearly been hard for her. The sheriff was getting impatient. "Enough talk. Let's get this done." But Marcus wasn't finished. "Sheriff, before you hang these women, you should know that Running Deer saved my life once. I owe her a debt, and I'm calling it in now. Give me 1 day to investigate this case properly. If I can't prove their innocence by tomorrow at sunset, you can proceed with the execution." The crowd buzzed with excitement. This was better than a regular hanging. Now they had drama and mystery. The sheriff looked trapped. He couldn't refuse such a reasonable request without seeming cruel and unfair. "1 day," he agreed reluctantly. "But if you can't prove anything, they hang tomorrow night, and you leave town immediately after." Marcus nodded, knowing he had just bought precious time. But he also knew that 1 day wasn't much time to uncover what he suspected was a complex web of lies and murder. As the crowd began to disperse and the women were led back to jail, Marcus caught Running Deer's eye one more time. He saw hope there, mixed with fear. He had 24 hours to save 2 innocent lives, and expose what he was becoming certain was a terrible injustice. The real question was, who was behind this deception, and why did they want these women dead? Marcus spent the rest of that day asking questions around town, but the answers he got only made him more suspicious. Everyone seemed to have the same story about the murders, almost like they had all been told what to say. The details were too perfect, too clean. He started at the Morrison house, where the murders supposedly happened. The building sat on the edge of town, a large wooden structure that showed clear signs of wealth. When Marcus examined the front door, he found something interesting. The lock had been broken from the inside, not the outside. If someone had broken in, the wood around the lock would be splintered inward. Instead, it looked like someone had smashed it from inside the house to make it look like a break-in. Inside the house, Marcus found more strange evidence. The rooms had been searched, but not in the way desperate thieves would do it. Everything was too organized, too careful. Real thieves would have made a bigger mess, especially if they were in a hurry after committing murder. In the bedroom, where the banker and his wife supposedly died, Marcus found dried blood on the floor and walls. But something bothered him about the blood patterns. He had seen enough violence in his life to know how blood splattered when people were stabbed. This looked wrong, like the blood had been poured and spread around rather than splashed during a struggle. The most suspicious thing was what he didn't find. There were no signs of the children who were supposedly killed. The sheriff claimed an entire family had been murdered, but Marcus could only find evidence of 2 adults living in the house. There were no children's clothes, no toys, no small beds. Either the Morrison family had no children, or someone was lying about them being killed. As evening approached, Marcus decided to visit the Apache camp outside of town. He needed to talk to people who actually knew Running Deer and Little Fox. The walk took him about an hour through scrubland and rocky hills. The Apache camp was small, maybe 20 people living in traditional dwellings. The old man Marcus had seen crying at the execution was there, sitting by a fire. His name was Gray Wolf, and he was Running Deer's grandfather. "Your granddaughter didn't kill anyone," Marcus said. Sitting down beside the old man, Gray Wolf looked at him with eyes full of pain. "I know this. Running Deer and Little Fox are healers, not killers. They go to town sometimes to trade medicine for supplies. They never hurt anyone. Tell me what really happened 3 nights ago." Gray Wolf's face darkened. "My granddaughters went to town to help sick woman. White woman named Sarah, who lives behind the saloon. She had fever, needed Apache medicine. Running Deer and Little Fox stayed with her all night, helping her get better." This was completely different from the sheriff's story. If the women were helping a sick person all night, they couldn't have been murdering the Morrison family. Is this Sarah still alive? Can she tell people where the women were? Grey Wolf shook his head sadly. Sarah left town yesterday morning. Sheriff told her she had to go, that it wasn't safe for her anymore. Marcus felt anger building inside him. The sheriff had gotten rid of the one person who could provide an alibi for the accused women. This was looking more and more like a setup. Why would someone want to frame your granddaughters? Marcus asked. Grey Wolf was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. Finally he spoke. 3 weeks ago, Running Deer saw something she shouldn't have seen. She was gathering herbs near the old mine when she heard voices. She hid and watched white men burying something in the desert. When they left, she went to look. It was bags of money and jewelry, more than she had ever seen. Marcus's heart began racing. Did she tell anyone about this? She told me, and I told her to forget about it. But I think someone found out she knew. Maybe they want her dead so she can't talk. Who were the men she saw? Grey Wolf's voice dropped to a whisper. She recognized one of them. The sheriff. Everything was starting to make sense now. The sheriff was involved in some kind of robbery or theft, and Running Deer had witnessed him hiding the stolen goods. To keep her quiet, he framed her for murder. But who did he really kill, if anyone? Grey Wolf, was the banker Morrison really murdered? The old man's eyes widened. Morrison left town 2 weeks ago. He took his wife and went east to California. Everyone knew this. They sold their house to the sheriff before they left. Marcus felt like he had been punched in the stomach. There had been no murders at all. The sheriff had bought the Morrison house, then staged a fake crime scene to frame the Apache women. The blood was probably from animals. And the stolen goods were probably the sheriff's own money that he claimed had been taken, but this raised an even bigger question. Why go through such an elaborate deception? Why not just arrest the women on some minor charge? There had to be more to this story. Marcus thanked Grey Wolf and headed back to town as darkness fell. He needed to find out more about this hidden money that Running Deer had seen. If the sheriff was going to such extreme lengths to keep it secret, it must be worth a fortune. The town was mostly quiet as Marcus walked down the main street. Most of the saloons were still open, and he could hear piano music and laughter coming from inside. He decided to stop at the largest saloon to see what he could learn. The Copper Ridge saloon was full of miners, ranchers, and townspeople. Marcus ordered a whiskey and listened to the conversations around him. Most people were talking about the planned execution tomorrow, but a few men in the corner were discussing something more interesting. I heard the railroad is coming through next year, one man said. They'll need to buy up a lot of land for the tracks. Yeah, especially that stretch of desert where the old mine is, another replied. Whoever owns that land is going to get rich when the railroad wants to buy it. Marcus's ears perked up. The old mine was where Running Deer had seen the sheriff burying money. If railroad money was involved, that could explain the sheriff's desperate actions. He moved closer to the group and pretended to be interested in their card game. Excuse me, he said. I'm new in town. Who owns that land around the old mine? One of the men laughed. That's Apache land, always has been. But there's talk that the government might force them to sell it soon. The railroad companies have a lot of influence with the territorial government. What happens to the Apache if they're forced to sell? They get moved to a reservation somewhere else. Probably get paid almost nothing for land that's worth a fortune. Marcus now understood the whole picture. The sheriff was working with someone, probably railroad interests or land speculators, to steal the Apache land. The money Running Deer had seen buried was probably payment for the sheriff's help in this scheme, but the Apache wouldn't sell their ancestral land willingly. So the sheriff needed to get rid of the tribal leaders and scare the rest into leaving. By executing Running Deer and Little Fox, who were respected healers and the granddaughters of an elder, he would terrorize the entire Apache community into abandoning their land. It was a ruthless plan, and it was going to work unless Marcus could stop it. But he still needed proof that would convince the townspeople. The word of a drifter against the sheriff wouldn't be enough. especially when many of the townspeople probably supported getting rid of the Apache. Marcus finished his drink and walked out into the night air. He had less than 18 hours before the execution, and he still needed to find solid evidence of the sheriff's corruption. The buried money would be perfect proof, but he would need to find it in the dark desert without being caught. As he walked toward his horse, Marcus heard footsteps behind him. He turned to see 3 men following him, their hands resting on their gun belts. In the moonlight, he could see the deputy's badge on one of them. "Sheriff wants to talk to you," the deputy said. "Right now." Marcus realized his investigation had not gone unnoticed. The sheriff knew he was getting close to the truth, and now Marcus might be walking into a trap that could cost him his life. Marcus followed the deputy and his 2 companions through the empty streets to the sheriff's office. The building was larger than most in town, with thick stone walls and iron bars on the windows. A single lamp burned in the front office, casting long shadows across wanted posters and official notices. Sheriff Thompson sat behind a massive wooden desk, cleaning his revolver with slow, deliberate movements. He didn't look up when Marcus entered, but his voice was calm and dangerous. "You've been asking a lot of questions today, stranger. Questions about things that don't concern you." "I'm trying to prevent an injustice," Marcus replied, keeping his voice steady despite the tension in the room. "Those women are innocent." Thompson finally looked up, his small eyes glittering in the lamplight. "Innocent? They're Apache? That's guilt enough in these parts." He set down his gun and leaned back in his chair. "But you know what really bothers me? You're not just some drifter who wandered into town. You know things. You know one of those women?" Marcus said nothing, but his hand moved slightly closer to his own gun. "I did some checking," Thompson continued. "Asked around about a man matching your description. Turns out there's a Marcus Sullivan, wanted for questioning back in Silver Creek. Something about accusations against a sheriff and some businessmen. Sound familiar?" Marcus felt his blood run cold. If Thompson knew about Silver Creek, he knew Marcus was dangerous to corrupt lawmen. "What do you want?" "I want you to ride out of town tonight and forget everything you think you learned here. In exchange, I won't send a telegram to Silver Creek about your location." Thompson's smile was cold as winter. "Those Apache women hang tomorrow as planned, and you disappear forever. Everyone wins, except the innocent women you're murdering." Thompson's face hardened. "Those women saw something they shouldn't have seen, just like you have. The difference is I'm giving you a chance to walk away. What if I refuse?" The sheriff gestured to his men. "Then you'll have an unfortunate accident tonight. Probably fall down some stairs. Maybe your horse will throw you into a canyon. Desert's a dangerous place for a lone traveler." Marcus looked around the room, calculating his chances. 3 armed men plus the sheriff, all watching him carefully. The smart thing would be to take the deal and leave town. But he couldn't abandon running deer after she had saved his life years ago. "I need time to think about it," Marcus said. "You have until midnight," Thompson replied. "That's 2 hours. After that, my offer expires and you become a problem that needs solving." Marcus nodded and turned to leave, but Thompson's voice stopped him. "Oh, and Sullivan? Don't even think about trying to free those women. My men are watching the jail, and the first sign of trouble, they die. Understand?" Marcus walked out of the sheriff's office with his mind racing. He had confirmed that Thompson was corrupt and planning to kill innocent women, but he was no closer to proving it. The buried money was still his best bet for evidence, but now he had less than 2 hours before Thompson's ultimatum expired. He walked to the stable where he had left his horse, thinking through his options. The Apache camp was too far away to reach and return before midnight. Even if he could get there, Grey Wolf and his people couldn't help against armed lawmen without risking a massacre. As Marcus saddled his horse, he heard a soft voice from the shadows. "Mister, you the man asking questions about running deer?" He turned to see a young Mexican woman, maybe 16 years old, hiding behind a stack of hay bales. She looked scared but determined. "I am. Who are you?" "My name is Rosa. I work at the saloon, cleaning and cooking. I heard what you said about the Apache women being innocent." Do you know something that can help them? Rosa nodded quickly. I know where Sheriff Thompson keeps his special things. Things he doesn't want people to see. There's a hidden room under his office. Marcus felt hope rising in his chest. What kind of things? Money, lots of money in bags and boxes. And papers. I saw him counting it 2 nights ago when I was cleaning the office late. He didn't know I was still there. Can you show me how to get into this hidden room? Rosa hesitated, fear showing in her eyes. If he catches us, he'll kill us both. He's done terrible things before. There was another girl who worked at the saloon, and she disappeared after she saw something she shouldn't have. Marcus understood her fear, but time was running out. Rosa, those women will die tomorrow morning unless we can prove the sheriff is lying. That hidden money might be the only evidence that can save them. She was quiet for a moment, then nodded. There's a back entrance to the sheriff's office through the old storage room. The hidden door is behind a bookshelf in his private office. But there are guards. How many? Usually 2 men outside, 1 inside. But tonight I think there are more because of you. Marcus thought quickly. A direct assault was suicide, but maybe he didn't need to fight his way in. Rosa, is there another way into the building? Maybe through the roof or a window? There's a skylight in the back office. It's how I got out the night I saw the money. But it's high up, and the glass is thick. Can you give me some rope and a hammer? Rosa disappeared for several minutes, then returned with the items Marcus had requested. She also brought a small bag of food and a water bottle. In case you have to run into the desert, she explained. Marcus tied one end of the rope around a strong beam in the stable and coiled the rest around his waist. Rosa, I need you to do something very important. If I'm not back by dawn, you need to tell the townspeople everything you know about the sheriff's hidden money. Can you do that? She nodded, though her hands were shaking. Be careful, mister. Sheriff Thompson has killed people before, and he won't hesitate to kill you. Marcus made his way carefully through the back alleys of the town, avoiding the main streets where Thompson's men might be watching. The sheriff's office sat on a small hill with the jail cells built into the back of the building. Marcus could see 2 guards, standing by the front entrance, and another, walking around the building every few minutes. Getting to the roof would require perfect timing. Marcus waited in the shadows of a nearby building, watching the guards' patrol pattern. The man walked around the sheriff's office every 10 minutes, taking about 3 minutes to complete the circuit, when the guard disappeared around the front corner. Marcus ran quickly to the back of the building and threw his rope up to a sturdy chimney. He climbed as quietly as possible, trying not to make any noise that would alert the guards. The roof was flat with a single skylight, just as Rosa had described. Marcus could see light coming through the glass from the office below. Using the hammer, he carefully broke one corner of the skylight. Trying to make as little noise as possible, the glass was thicker than he expected, and it took several minutes of careful work to create a hole large enough to squeeze through. Every sound seemed incredibly loud in the quiet night air. Finally, Marcus was able to lower himself through the skylight into the sheriff's office. He could hear voices from the front of the building, but the back office was empty. Now he needed to find the hidden door that Rosa had described. The bookshelf along the back wall looked ordinary, but when Marcus examined it closely, he could see that it wasn't quite flush with the wall. He pushed against different sections until he found one that moved slightly. With some effort, part of the bookshelf swung inward, revealing a dark space behind it. Marcus lit a match and saw a small room filled with wooden boxes and canvas bags. His heart pounded as he realized he had found the evidence he needed. But he also heard footsteps approaching the office door. Someone was coming, and Marcus was trapped in a hidden room with nowhere to run. Marcus quickly blew out his match and pressed himself against the wall of the hidden room as the footsteps grew closer. Through a crack in the secret door, he could see Sheriff Thompson enter his office. Carrying a bottle of whiskey and looking agitated, the sheriff sat heavily in his chair and took a long drink from the bottle. "Damn stranger," he muttered to himself. "Should have just shot him the moment he opened his mouth." Marcus held his breath, afraid to make even the slightest sound. He was trapped like a rat in a hole, and if Thompson discovered him now, There would be no explaining his presence. Another man entered the office, a well-dressed stranger Marcus hadn't seen before. The man wore an expensive suit and carried himself like someone used to power and money. "Is our problem taken care of?" the stranger asked in a smooth, educated voice. "Not yet," Thompson replied. "The drifter is more trouble than I expected. He's been asking questions all over town, and some people are starting to listen. You said you could handle this situation cleanly. The railroad consortium is paying you good money to make sure that Apache land is available when we need it." Marcus's eyes widened. He was right about the railroad connection, but this sounded even bigger than he had imagined. "The Apache women will hang tomorrow morning as planned," Thompson said. "That will scare the rest of the tribe into leaving. But this Sullivan character might cause problems. Then eliminate him. We can't afford witnesses or heroes. Too much money is at stake." The stranger walked closer to Thompson's desk, and Marcus could see his face clearly through the crack. He was a man in his 50s with silver hair and cold blue eyes. Everything about him screamed wealth and power. "Let me remind you of what's at stake here, Sheriff. The Southern Pacific Railroad is planning a direct line from Los Angeles to El Paso. The route goes right through that Apache land, which sits on top of one of the richest silver veins in the territory. We're talking about millions of dollars in mining rights alone, plus the railroad contract." Marcus felt sick to his stomach. This wasn't just about land, it was about a massive conspiracy involving the railroad and mining interests. The Apache weren't just being driven from their homes. They were being murdered for silver and corporate profits. "The territorial governor is already on board," the stranger continued. "He'll sign the papers moving the Apache to a reservation as soon as we eliminate the tribal leadership. Your job is to make sure there's no resistance. Hanging the two women will break their spirit," Thompson agreed. "Gray Wolf is too old to fight, and without his granddaughters the rest will give up. What about the money we buried? Is it still safe?" Thompson nodded toward the hidden room where Marcus was hiding. "Right behind that wall. 50,000 in gold and silver, plus the deeds to the land we've already bought under false names. Once the Apache are gone, we'll own everything from here to the mountain pass." Marcus realized he was listening to the details of the largest land grab scheme in territorial history. These men weren't just corrupt, they were willing to commit genocide for profit. The stranger checked his pocket watch. "I need to catch the morning train back to Los Angeles. Make sure this Sullivan problem is resolved tonight. The railroad executives are nervous about any delays." "He'll disappear into the desert," Thompson promised. "Just another drifter who got careless around dangerous men." After the stranger left, Thompson sat alone in his office for several more minutes, drinking and mumbling to himself. Finally, he stood up and walked toward the front of the building, probably to check on his guards. This was Marcus's chance. He quickly searched through the boxes and bags in the hidden room, looking for evidence he could use. He found exactly what he needed: detailed contracts showing the conspiracy, maps of the Apache land marked with mining claims, and correspondence between Thompson and the railroad executives. Most damning of all was a letter from the territorial governor promising to relocate the Apache once the current leadership problem is resolved. The letter made it clear that the governor knew about the planned executions and approved of them. Marcus stuffed several documents inside his shirt and grabbed a bag of gold coins as additional proof. But as he prepared to leave, he heard Thompson returning to the office. "Johnson," the sheriff called out. "Get in here." One of the guards entered the office. "Yes, sir." "Take 2 men and check on our friend Sullivan. If he's not getting ready to leave town, bring him back here permanently." Marcus knew he had run out of time. He needed to get this evidence to people who could act on it, but Thompson's men would be looking for him within minutes. Climbing back through the skylight would take too long and make too much noise. Instead, Marcus waited until he heard Thompson and the guard leave the office again. Then he carefully opened the hidden door and crept through the dark office toward the front entrance. He could hear voices outside, but they seemed to be moving away from the building. Marcus slipped out the front door and pressed himself against the wall. listening carefully. The voices were coming from the direction of the stable where he had left his horse. Thompson's men were already searching for him. He needed a different plan. Running into the desert on foot would be suicide, but staying in town meant certain death. Then he remembered something Rosa had told him. There was a back entrance to the sheriff's office through an old storage room. If there was a back entrance to the sheriff's office, there might be other buildings connected by old tunnels or passages. Many frontier towns had underground connections between important buildings for protection during Indian raids. Marcus made his way carefully to the back of the sheriff's office and found the storage room Rosa had mentioned. Inside, he discovered what he was looking for, an old tunnel that led under the main street toward the bank building. The tunnel was narrow and dark, clearly built many years ago. Marcus crawled through it, trying not to think about spiders or snakes that might be sharing the space. The documents in his shirt crinkled with every movement, but he protected them carefully. The tunnel ended at a wooden ladder leading up to a trapdoor. Marcus climbed carefully and found himself in the basement of the town bank. Upstairs, he could hear Thompson's men searching the streets, calling his name and threatening anyone who might be hiding him. Marcus realized he had accidentally stumbled into the perfect place. The bank would have a telegraph office, and the bank president might be someone who could act on the evidence he had found. But first, he needed to make sure he could trust whoever ran the bank. He climbed the stairs quietly and peered through a crack in the door leading to the main floor of the bank. A single lamp burned at a desk where an older man was working late. Surrounded by ledger books and papers, Marcus recognized him from earlier in the day. This was Henry Morrison, the bank president and the man whose supposed murder had been used to frame the Apache women. But Morrison was very much alive, which meant Marcus had found another piece of the puzzle. Taking a deep breath, Marcus opened the door and stepped into the bank. Morrison looked up in surprise, his hand moving toward a gun on his desk. "Don't be afraid," Marcus said quickly. "I know you're supposed to be dead, and I know who's responsible for this whole conspiracy. But I need your help to save 2 innocent women and expose the truth." Morrison stared at him for a moment, then slowly moved his hand away from the gun. "You're the stranger who stopped the execution today. Thompson told me you were dangerous." "Thompson told you? You're working with him?" Morrison's face went pale. "Not willingly. They threatened to kill my family if I didn't cooperate with their land scheme. I had to pretend to leave town and hide here in the bank. But I never agreed to let innocent people die." Marcus felt relief wash over him. Morrison might be his ally rather than another enemy. "Then help me stop this. I have evidence that can bring down Thompson and his railroad friends, but I need someone with authority to act on it." "What kind of evidence?" Marcus pulled the crumpled documents from inside his shirt and spread them across Morrison's desk. The banker's eyes widened as he read through the contracts, letters, and land deeds. "My God," Morrison whispered. "This goes all the way to the territorial capital. They're planning to steal thousands of acres and kill anyone who gets in their way. Including your family, if you had really been murdered," Marcus pointed out. "They used your supposed death to frame those Apache women." Morrison's hands shook as he continued reading. "Look at this list of names. Half the territorial government is involved in this conspiracy. Judges, politicians, even military officers. How can we fight something this big?" "One step at a time," Marcus replied. "First, we save Running Deer and Little Fox, then we expose the whole operation." "Do you have access to a telegraph?" "Yes, but who can we trust? If Thompson has the governor in his pocket, sending telegrams to Santa Fe won't help." Marcus thought for a moment. "What about the federal government?" "This involves railroad fraud and conspiracy across territorial lines. That makes it a federal crime." Morrison nodded slowly. "There's a federal marshal stationed in Tucson. Marshal William Hayes. I've dealt with him before on bank security matters. He's honest as far as I know. Can you send him a telegram tonight?" "The telegraph office is closed, but I have a key. The operator is Thompson's cousin, though. If he sees the message, he'll warn the sheriff. Then we need to send it without the operator knowing." "Can you work the telegraph equipment yourself?" Morrison shook his head. I never learned how. But I know someone who can help us. Sarah, the woman who was treating Running Deer and Little Fox the night of the supposed murders. She didn't really leave town. She's hiding in the old church because she was afraid Thompson would kill her for being a witness. Marcus felt hope rising again. Not only could Sarah provide an alibi for the Apache women, but she might be able to operate the telegraph equipment. Where is this church? About a mile north of town, up in the hills. It's been abandoned for years, but the building is still solid. Sarah has been hiding there since yesterday. We need to get to her, but Thompson's men are watching the roads. Is there another way out of town? Morrison thought for a moment. The old mine shaft. It has tunnels that connect to natural caves in the hills. You can reach the church without being seen, but it's dangerous. Some of those tunnels have collapsed, and you could get lost in the dark. I'll take that risk. How do I find the entrance? Behind the bank, there's an old shed that looks abandoned. The floor has a trapdoor that leads down to the mine tunnels. Follow the main shaft north for about half a mile, then look for a natural cave opening that leads up toward the surface. Marcus gathered up the evidence documents and tucked them safely inside his shirt again. Morrison, I need you to do something important while I'm gone. Write down everything you know about this conspiracy. Names, dates, meetings you witnessed. If something happens to me, that information needs to survive. Morrison nodded and pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. What about my family? Thompson said they were being watched. Where are they? Hidden at my brother's ranch, 50 miles east of here. Thompson doesn't know about that location yet, but if this plan fails... It won't fail, Marcus said with more confidence than he felt. But if it does, take your family and run. Get to the federal authorities and tell them everything. Marcus left Morrison working on his written statement and made his way through the bank's back rooms to the shed Morrison had described. The trapdoor was hidden under a pile of old tools and lumber. When Marcus lifted it, he could smell the damp, musty air of underground tunnels. He climbed down a wooden ladder into complete darkness. Using matches sparingly to conserve them, Marcus made his way through the tunnel system. The mine shaft was wider than the tunnel under the sheriff's office, but much longer. Water dripped from the ceiling, and his footsteps echoed strangely in the confined space. After what felt like hours but was probably only 30 minutes, Marcus saw a faint light ahead. Fresh air carried the scent of pine trees and desert sage. He had found the cave opening Morrison described. The climb to the surface was steep and rocky, but Marcus emerged into the cool night air feeling hopeful for the first time in hours. In the distance, he could see the silhouette of the old church against the starlit sky. The church was a small stone building with a bell tower that had lost its bell long ago. Wooden shutters covered the windows, but Marcus could see a faint light inside. He approached carefully, not wanting to frighten Sarah if she was really hiding there. "Sarah?" he called softly. "I'm a friend. Morrison sent me." The light inside moved, and then a woman's voice answered. "Who are you? How do I know you're not one of Thompson's men?" "My name is Marcus Sullivan. I'm trying to save Running Deer and Little Fox from being hanged tomorrow. Morrison told me you were with them the night of the supposed murders." The church door opened slowly, and a woman in her 30s appeared. She was thin and pale, clearly frightened, but trying to be brave. "Are the Apache women still alive?" "For now. But they're scheduled to hang at dawn unless I can prove their innocence." "You're the only witness who can provide an alibi for them?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I knew this would happen. I should never have left them alone in town. If I had stayed, maybe Thompson wouldn't have been able to arrest them. What exactly happened that night?" "I was very sick with fever. Running Deer and Little Fox came to my cabin behind the saloon because someone told them I needed help. They stayed with me all night using Apache medicine to break my fever. They saved my life. Why did you leave town?" Sarah's face hardened with anger. "Thompson came to my cabin the next morning. He said there had been murders and the Apache women were suspects. When I told him they had been with me all night, he got very angry. He said I was mistaken, that I had been delirious with fever and couldn't remember correctly, but you knew you were right." "Of course I did. Those women never left my sight. When I insisted on telling the truth, Thompson threatened me. He said if I testified for them, I would be charged as an accomplice to murder. He gave me 1 hour to pack my things and leave town forever. Marcus felt his anger growing. Thompson wasn't just corrupt. He was systematically destroying every piece of evidence that could save the innocent women. Sarah, I need your help with something else. Can you operate telegraph equipment? Yes, I worked as a telegraph operator in Denver before I came here. Why? We need to send a message to a federal marshal in Tucson. But we can't let Thompson know about it. Marcus explained about the evidence he had found and Morrison's plan to contact Marshal Hayes. Sarah listened carefully, then nodded with determination. I'll do whatever it takes to save those women. They're good people who helped me when I needed it most. The three of them made their way back through the mine tunnels to the bank, where Morrison was waiting with several pages of handwritten notes. His statement detailed meetings he had witnessed, conversations he had overheard, and documents he had been forced to sign under threat. This is enough evidence to hang Thompson and half the territorial government, Morrison said. But we need to get it to the right people. They made their way carefully through the empty streets to the telegraph office. Sarah used her key to enter the building and began working the equipment while Marcus and Morrison kept watch. The message to Marshal Hayes was brief but urgent. Federal crimes being committed in Copper Ridge, railroad conspiracy, land fraud, planned murders. 2 innocent Apache women scheduled for execution at dawn. Send immediate help. Evidence available. Signed, Henry Morrison, bank president. As Sarah finished sending the message, Marcus heard horses approaching outside. Through the window, he could see Thompson and 4 armed men riding toward the telegraph office. They know we're here, Marcus whispered. Is there a back exit? Morrison shook his head. Only the front door. We're trapped. Thompson's voice boomed from outside. Sullivan! I know you're in there. Come out with your hands up, and maybe I won't kill your friends. Marcus looked at Sarah and Morrison. These people had risked their lives to help him, and now they were all in mortal danger. But the message had been sent, and Marshal Hayes would receive it in the morning. The question was whether any of them would live long enough to see federal help arrive. What do we do? Sarah whispered. Marcus checked his gun and looked around the telegraph office for anything that could be used as a weapon or barricade. We hold out until dawn and pray the cavalry arrives in time. Thompson's men surrounded the telegraph office as the first gray light of dawn began to appear on the horizon. Marcus could see them through the windows, taking positions behind water barrels and wooden crates. They were professional gunmen, not the usual drunken deputies he had expected. Last chance, Sullivan, Thompson shouted. Come out now, and your friends live. Marcus knew Thompson was lying. There were no witnesses left alive in any of the sheriff's previous schemes. All 3 of them had seen too much evidence to be allowed to survive. Sarah, can you send another telegram? Marcus asked quietly. To who? It will take hours for anyone to get here from Tucson. Send a message to every telegraph office within 100 miles. Tell them what's happening here. Even if we don't survive, the truth needs to get out. Sarah began working the telegraph key again, sending urgent messages to Santa Fe, El Paso, Tucson, and every other station she could reach. Each message was simple. Corrupt sheriff murdering innocent people in Copper Ridge. Railroad conspiracy. Send help immediately. Morrison found an old shotgun behind the telegraph operator's desk and checked to make sure it was loaded. I'm not going down without a fight. None of us are, Marcus replied. But we need to be smart. Thompson wants us alive long enough to find out what evidence we have and who else might know about it. A shot rang out, and the front window of the telegraph office exploded in a shower of glass. Sarah ducked behind the telegraph equipment while Morrison and Marcus took cover behind overturned desks. That's just a warning, Thompson called out. The next shots won't miss. Marcus peered through the broken window and counted at least 6 men with rifles. The odds were terrible, but surrendering meant certain death for all of them. Plus, running deer and little fox would still hang. Then Marcus heard something that made his heart leap with hope, the sound of many horses approaching from the south. Through the gray dawn light, he could see a large group of riders coming toward town at full gallop. Thompson heard it too. His voice carried a note of panic as he shouted orders to his men. Johnson, take 2 men and see who's coming. If it's more drifters, run them off. But as the riders got closer, Marcus could see they weren't drifters or townspeople. These were Apache warriors, at least 20 of them. Riding hard toward Copper Ridge, Gray Wolf was leading them. And his face was painted for war. Thompson's men opened fire on the Apache riders. But the warriors scattered and took cover behind buildings and rocks. Suddenly, the sheriff's men found themselves caught between 2 groups of enemies. The Apache must have figured out what was really happening, Morrison said. They're not going to let their people die without a fight. The battle in the streets was fierce but brief. Thompson's hired gunmen were outnumbered and outflanked. Within minutes, 3 of them were dead and the others were surrendering. Marcus kicked open the damaged door of the telegraph office and ran toward the jail, where running deer and little fox were being held. If Thompson escaped, he might try to kill the women before anyone could stop him, but Thompson had the same idea. Marcus saw the corrupt sheriff running toward the jail with a torch in one hand and his gun in the other. If he couldn't hang the Apache women legally, he was going to burn them alive. Thompson! Marcus shouted. The sheriff turned and fired 3 quick shots in Marcus's direction. One bullet splintered the wooden post next to Marcus's head, but he kept running. Thompson reached the jail and began pouring oil from a lamp around the wooden building. Marcus tackled Thompson just as the sheriff was about to light the oil. The 2 men rolled in the dirt, fighting for control of Thompson's gun. The sheriff was larger and stronger, but Marcus was desperate. You're too late, Thompson snarled as they struggled. Even if you kill me, the railroad will find another way to get that land. You can't fight progress. Watch me, Marcus replied, and drove his fist into Thompson's jaw. The sheriff went limp, and Marcus quickly grabbed the keys from Thompson's belt. Inside the jail, he found running deer and little fox chained to the wall. They were weak from poor food and no water, but alive. I told you I would repay my debt, Marcus said as he unlocked their chains. Running deer smiled weakly. My grandfather always said you were a man of honor. By the time Marcus helped the women outside, the fight was over. Gray Wolf and his warriors had captured or killed all of Thompson's men. The old Apache leader approached Marcus with tears of gratitude in his eyes. You have saved my granddaughters and exposed the truth. The Apache people will never forget this debt. What about the railroad conspiracy? Marcus asked. Thompson was just one part of a much bigger scheme. Morrison arrived with a bundle of documents and a satisfied smile. That problem is being handled. While you were fighting, Sarah sent copies of all our evidence to newspaper editors in 3 territories. By this afternoon, every paper from California to Texas will be printing the story of the Copper Ridge conspiracy. As if to confirm his words, a group of riders approached from the east. Marcus recognized the lead rider as a federal marshal by his badge and official bearing. Marshal Hayes had received their telegraph message and ridden through the night to reach Copper Ridge. Looks like the cavalry arrived just in time, Sarah said, emerging from the telegraph office with a stack of incoming messages. I've been getting replies to our telegrams all morning. Federal agents are already moving to arrest the railroad executives and government officials involved in this scheme. Marshal Hayes dismounted and approached the group. Mr. Morrison, I'm Marshal William Hayes. I got your telegram about federal crimes being committed here. Marshal, do we have a story for you? Morrison replied. And enough evidence to put half the territorial government in prison. Over the next several hours, Marcus told the entire story to Marshal Hayes while Sarah and Morrison provided supporting documentation. The federal marshal was shocked by the scope of the conspiracy, but impressed by the evidence they had gathered. This is the biggest land fraud case I've ever seen, Hayes said. You've uncovered a criminal network that stretches from Los Angeles to Washington. The railroad companies involved will lose their government contracts, and every official who participated will face federal charges. Thompson regained consciousness in chains, cursing and threatening everyone around him. But his power was broken, and he knew it. The Apache land would remain in tribal hands, protected by federal treaties that the corrupt territorial officials could no longer ignore. "What about you, Mr. Sullivan?" Marshal Hayes asked. "I understand there's some trouble in your past." Marcus had been dreading this moment. "I oppose corruption in Silver Creek, and corrupt officials there want me silenced." Hayes studied the evidence Marcus had gathered and the testimony of the people he had saved. "Based on what I've seen here, I think those charges in Silver Creek deserve federal investigation too. Would you be willing to testify against the officials who forced you to flee?" Marcus looked around at the people whose lives he had saved and who had risked everything to help him. Running Deer gave him an encouraging nod, and Morrison smiled supportively. "Yes, Marshal. I'll testify. It's time the corruption ended everywhere." As the sun climbed higher in the desert sky, Marcus realized his days of wandering were finally over. He had found something worth fighting for, and people worth standing beside. The Apache women were safe, the conspiracy was exposed, and justice was finally coming to the territory. Running Deer approached him as the federal agents were loading Thompson into a prison wagon. "You saved our lives and our land. But more than that, you showed us that not all white men are enemies. There is a place for you among our people if you choose it." Marcus looked out across the desert that had been his home for so many months. It no longer seemed harsh and empty. Instead, it looked like a land full of possibilities, where honest people could make a good life if they had the courage to fight for it. "I think I'd like that," Marcus replied. "I think I'd like that very much." The desert wanderer's journey was over. His real life was just beginning.